All right, so this question has been popping up on forums and stuff all over the place, and it's talking about powering your RV between uh, different places. People asking about dryer vents, people asking about generators. So we're going to talk about power with RV and exactly what you can and can't do, shouldn't do, etc., etc. So if you have an RV in the United States specifically, you end up having either a 30 amp or a 50 amp service RV. There's certain characteristics about this that you should know. A 30 amp is a 120 volt, and so just for your knowledge, power as a whole, when you're talking about power, the lowest common denominator across both of these is going to be watts. So watts, to figure out watts, you take the voltage, the potential, times the maximum amps, which in this case is 30. So 120 times 30, I believe it's 3,600. Yes, it is. So that's going to be the maximum that your RV is going to be drawing. And actually with a power factor and all this type of stuff, we call it about 80% of this, which, you know, that would be the maximum draw. So if you're looking for a generator or something like that on a 30 amp, 120 volt RV, anything in this neighborhood, 3,600 watts, is going to be more than enough. Now you go to a 50 amp, and the reason we'll talk about this. A 50 amp is a 240 volt 50 amp service. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that there's two legs of power, and then you have a neutral, and then you have a ground. Okay, the way that this works is across leg 1 and leg 2, these are out of phase with each other. And so from here to here is 240, we'll just put it over here. From here to here is 240 volts. From here to here is 120. And from here to here is 120. So this is L1, this is L2. So if you put a multimeter, probe it from here to here, you're going to get 240 volts. Now if you look the way that I did this intentionally, it kind of looks like the 50 amp plug, which is like that. And so this would be L1, neutral, L2, ground. Okay, so between L1 and neutral, if you were to probe between there, or L2 and neutral, so you're basically probing between here and here, you should never really get more than 120 volts. There's 120 volts here, and again, this isn't really a fair, because there's actually, it looks like this. Here's L1 and here's L2. But whenever you probe across both, their potential's as far away from each other as possible, which is the 240 volts. So if you have big appliances in your big RV, 50 amp, 240 volt RV, they're going to be drawing most of your dryers. If you have an electric range, they're going to draw off of that, you know, both service legs. Now inside of your box, some of your breakers are going to be on the L1 and some of your breakers are going to be on the L2. So we'll just do 2 and L1, okay? And then you're going to have some that are bipole that take up 2 spaces. And I mean, this is not really a real representation, but you're going to have some that are bipole, some breakers that are 2 that are bonded together. And that's, they're looking at both legs of power whenever you do that. So, and to figure out this, like I did here, you do 240 volts times 50 amp, because each of these legs gets a 50 amp leg. So 240 times 50 equals 12,000. And so now with 12,000 watts, I said volts, I meant watts. 12,000 watts, and you can divide that by 2 across each leg, equals 6,000 per leg, right? Which, if you do this math now, 6,000 divided by 120 equals 50. So, but then again, you have a power factor, and I should put this in here, power factor of 80%, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have a 50 amp RV, you're going to want a generator that has this range of wattage. That is going to be, you know, somewhere in that 12,000, and that would fully supply your service needs. Now, what we hear is people that want to cross these two things. So hey, I'm a homeowner and I only have a 30 amp service, 120 volt RV, and I want to plug it into something like my dryer vent. Well, your dryer vent has that look to it. Guess what? This is a 240, I'm going to label this as dryer, and I'm going to get rid of this here. So, L1, neutral, L2. But this is only a 30 amp most of the time. All right, so as I was editing this, I realized there is yet another dryer plug, and forgive me, the L in this dryer is actually the neutral, and I have it labeled as the ground here. But I realized there are a lot of people that have a dryer plug that look like this. This is an older dryer plug. It's a NEMA plug. It's the 1030. It does say R there. I thought it said P earlier. This is the receptacle, so it's the 1030R. And you'll notice it's a 30 amp rated plug, and it down here shows it can be used for 120 or 250. Oh, it's a 50 or 30. It says 250. So 125, 250 volt. And this plug, more often than not, is going to be a 240 volt plug on your wall. So the way to figure this out is you put one lead of your multimeter here, put one lead of your multimeter here, and you're going to read across those poles, and it's going to say 200 and plus volts, whatever, 220, 230, you know, pretty close to that, okay? If that's the case, we have some hoops to go through. Now, if you plug your multimeter from here to here, it's going to be 220, 240, like I said. If it's from here to here, like if you go from here to here, it's going to be 120. And if you meter from here to here, it's going to be 120. So that's what they've done here is they've given you the neutral, hot, and the hot. And so they've dropped the ground off of this plug, and so that's all you get. Now, if you meter across everything, like from here to here and it's 120, from here to here is 120, and then from here to here is 0 or maybe just a couple of volts, then it's actually very rarely wired in that 120 volt or 125 volt configuration. And like I said, very rare. The chances of that, I would say, are next to 0. But you know, if you check it twice, but if that was the case, then you could convert this plug to just the regular standard 30 volt or 30 amp RV plug, and it would work just fine. Like I said, 99% of the time I would wager and bet that this is going to be 240 volts across this. In order to do that, it still technically could be done because you have a hot leg here, a hot leg here, and a neutral here. But here's how you do it. You would not be able to go through just one conversion. You would have to go through 2 conversions, and I'm going to list these down below, but ultimately you would have to get one of these, and you would have to get one of these. This is what would plug into your dryer, so you would have the hot, hot, and neutral, which goes down into what is a standard 50 amp plug, and you notice it has this green ground wire that comes out of it. So you would plug this into the dryer vent, and then you would plug this into the ground, or for example, I'm just going to come over here into that port on a regular plug, and then you would have the ground, neutral, hot, and hot. So from there, you would then purchase this guy, which has the 50 amp plug. This is your standard 50 amp plug that goes from your RV, or a 50 amp RV, or in this case, a dog bone, that would then drop the neutral, or sorry, the one of the hot legs, Or, and like I said, I've seen it, some of them say that they bond the hots. I'm not certain, but either way, the way that would work is you would get this plug here, which is your 30 amp RV, and that would give you 120 volts across those two blades. And then one of them being hot, you'd get 120 volts between this blade and that ground pin. And the other one would be a neutral, so you would get next to nothing between this blade and that ground pin, or vice versa. Either way, you just need to be very, very aware, because you're going through, this is not a permanent solution. I don't think this is a great idea. I'm just telling you it can be done. In a pinch, etc., you could make it happen. Is it something I would want to rely on? And if you're going to be plugging this in for a long period of time, please just pay an electrician to get you what you need. It's worth the money. If you had to do it this way because you're in an absolute emergency, the point is here people are saying you can't do it. Well, no, you can. You just have to know what you're doing. So anyways, continuing on, we'll talk about generators here in just a second. And also I'll link these down below, so you can buy them and at your own risk. Again, you can't hold me liable for any of this stuff. It's all up to you. You know, if you don't know what you're doing and blow up your RV, you know, you probably should have hired somebody in the first place. But just want to make sure that you know you can do it. Now, if it looks exactly like your regular with it, where it's like this, and just a circle, and your 50 amp plugs into it, then you have a 50 amp plug, and you can just plug your 50 amp service in. Now, they make dog bones, is what they're called, that plug into a 50 amp, and so it looks like this on one side, and then on the other side it looks like your 30 amp plug like that. And basically what they've done is they've dropped off one of these plugs, and so they are sending you, this is going to be L1, neutral, and ground, if I can write a G. And so they're putting L1 to here, neutral to here, and ground to here, depending on which way you're looking at it. And again, the hope is, and so they're just basically not even wiring this one up. So the same exists with this plug. You can create one of these where you have the ground, neutral, and L1, and this is going to be a 30 amp breaker. So you're going to be able to fully run this. You just have to drop your second leg of power, because you have 120 volts between these 2 points here, leg 1 and neutral. You do not want to wire in leg 1 to leg 2 and ground. That would give you a leg 1 and a leg 2 and a ground. That is a 240 volt outlet, and that is not okay for this. You do not want that, because if you put a meter across this, you get 240 volts. That's not good. So, is it possible to plug your RV into a dryer outlet? Yes, it is. You're also going to see sometimes like some rounded things on generators. They are clearly labeled 240. This will be actually, the one I just drew is only going to be a 120. And you can typically identify them by, well, they have to be labeled, first of all. You can also, they'll be like an L6 30 or something like that. You know, they'll I don't remember the nomenclature immediately, but something like that. If there's 4 pins, it's the same thing. And you know, there will be something like that in there. And they will specifically say 120/240. And the whole thing is that, yeah, this is just like this dryer outlet. So one of these is going to be L1, and I don't remember specifically which one it is. I think it's like this, L1, L2, and then ground. And so the whole thing is that what they're doing is, whatever you plug into this, it will, if you're getting a 120 version, it's literally only taking one leg, tying it to neutral, and giving you a ground. So you end up with a leg 1, neutral, and then a ground. And this is 120 volts, and then ground. Okay, so to recap, can you plug a 30 amp RV into a dryer outlet? The answer is yes, you can. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to wire in a specific plug. You got to go to Home Depot and get name your big box store, go and get the plug that plugs into your dryer, and understand you're only going to connect 3 wires. You're going to connect leg 1, neutral, and ground to your receptacle that is going to be you know, looking like an RV. And before you plug your RV into it, you need to probe between here and here. You should never see 240 volts or anything above 200. 120, you know, across these two, if this is L1 or hot, and, you know, again, I'm not telling you to go do this stuff if you don't know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, pay somebody to do it for you. If you have a halfway sense about you, you can figure this out. That's not that hard to do. So hopefully this helps. I mean, it's a lot of chicken scratch, but at the same time, I just want to remove any confusion of what you can or can't do. It's really not that complicated, but you just have to make sure if you're a 30 amp, you need to never see any value more than 120 volts whenever you're probing. You know, touch probes into from here to here, from here to here, and from here to here. And if it's any time ever above 120 or 130, that's too much. You don't want that. If it's, but if you're a 50 amp, the other thing about this, you also see those dog bones that do, they'll have a 30 amp plug here on this side, and then they have a regular 120 amp, or sorry, 120 volt, which is a 20 amp plug. So they'll do this, and then they connect together to make a 50 amp. And what they are doing is taking leg 1 hot, neutral, and ground, and leg 1 hot, neutral and ground. And they are making this leg 1 be L1 here. They're tying the neutrals together, giving you neutral, and then they are making the other one, the other leg, actually I'll just label that L2. So you actually only have 20 amps across this, I can't write, and then 30 amp across this, but you will never receive the full potential because you're going to be limited to by this 20 amp. Anything that's running across both legs at 240 volts like a dryer, if you have a 30 amp dryer, it's going to be really upset because you only have 20 amp maximum draw on this circuit. So you're going to make your dryer mad if it's pulling higher than that. So, but you know, something that's that big, you shouldn't have that big of a deal with. Anyways, there's a lot of rambling. That's just how it all works. I just feel like there's a lot of questions around this, and so here's a video to kind of try to understand how it all works. So anyways, best of luck. Don't blow yourself up. Don't set things on fire. Ask questions, and don't do anything that you're not certain of yourself, but just pay attention, and you'll be okay. Or ask somebody that does have a clue. Ask an electrician friend. Okay, see ya.